We're here to talk about CJI wildcards. Who are we? I'm Ross. That's Calum. This is the Jiu Jitsu Oracle. There's been some developments with CJI2, and Craig Jones, the organizer, has revealed that each team is going to be able to pick a wild card, one grappler that's not associated with their gym or continent, if that's what the team's representing, who they can bring in to fill out the roster in an effort to make the rosters as strong as possible. So maybe if you've got a weakness in one of the categories, like under 66, you can bring in an under 66 guy from somewhere else in the world, and that will give you a stronger team. So what do you think about that concept, first of all, Calum?
Yeah, I think it's good. It makes it more interesting, gives both the guys that don't belong to a team that also don't get picked by the continental teams a chance to compete. Because, for example, like the Americas team for 66, you've got Baby Shark and Pato. Only one of those guys are going to get picked. Neither of those guys have a team competing, so it'd be a shame for one of those guys not to get to compete. And then also for the teams like Australia have said they've had a weakness at 66, so they're going to use their wild card for that. So it gives those guys a better opportunity to fill out their team. So I think it is a good idea.
Let's talk about some other recent news. So before we dive into the wild cards. So as you said, Australasia, Lachlan Giles is going to coach that team. And Lachlan has picked 2 grapplers already for that team. So at under 77 kilograms is going to be Levi Jones-Leary. And at under 88 kilograms is going to be Lucas Kennard. And then they're going to hold trials for the under 99 and over 99 slots. And then Lachlan is going to choose a wild card from somewhere else in the world that's not Asia, Oceania, to fill that category. Do you think that's a smart strategy from Lachlan, based on what you know about grapplers in that region?
Yeah, I think using the wild card for that category is a good move, but I will say, obviously, we know that team is not going to be the favourite to win anyway, but it's not the best sign when you have to hold, I feel, like a competition to fill up to your divisions, you know? It's like the team USA, when they were putting their team together for the Olympics, they didn't put together like a 1v1 tournament. They knew exactly who they wanted and they went out and seeked them. They contacted Kevin Durant, Anthony Edwards. They knew who they wanted and they got them on their team. So it's not the best sign when you have to hold a tournament to get guys on your team. You'd rather have an abundance of guys to pick from and you'd go seek the best guys, you know. But yeah, it's what they have to do in their position. So hopefully they get some good guys with some good submission threats coming out of those higher weight classes.
Originally, when you mentioned that, I thought you were referencing wrestling. I was like, no, wrestling, they did do trials, right, to pick their team. It was basketball you were referencing, right? Yeah, and to fill out one of their heavier slots, what did they do? They persuaded a guy from Cameroon to change allegiance.
Yeah.
So maybe Embiid was technically their wild card in that event, right? But let's steer away from basketball right now while we're doing the record, and we can chat more about like how your Lakers are doing later on, right? So we've got that for the Australasia team. Now, I consider a wild card to be a free agent not attached with anyone else, because I don't think it's realistic for, let's just take Europe, for Europe to say, we've got these 4 grapplers in the lighter weight classes, and then over 99, what we'll do is we'll take Nicky Rod, because there's no way Nicky Rod's going to not compete for B team and then go to another team and go against his guys, right? So I think what we're looking at is outliers not attached with the major teams taking part. Do you think that's like a fair assessment, Cal?
Yeah, definitely. I don't think guys are going to go against their own team, especially if they're from a stronger team. If you had a particularly selfish person that was on one of the weaker teams and they got an opportunity to jump in with New Wave or something, then they might take it. But yeah, I don't feel like most guys are going to do that.
Okay, so we're going to look for guys who are not attached to the major teams. Now, it seems that we definitely know 3 of the teams that are going to take part, right? So there's going to be B team, New Wave, because we've seen the handshake that went around the world with Craig and John Danaher, and 10th Planet have long been said to be taking part. So then there's 2 more team slots. And from what I've seen online, it seems those 2 teams might be Atos and Pedigo. Now, I haven't seen anything official to do with that, but that's just what the chatter seems to be. So do you think that would be a good use of the 2 other team slots to bring in Atos and Pedigo? I mean, I think like Atos would be favourites probably right now, and we need to see how the roster gets pulled together for them. And I think with PSF, you've always got like that history with flow grappling, promoting that team, the sort of documentaries we've seen on them, the notoriety of a lot of guys. I don't know how many like truly elite guys they've got, but I just wonder if they can pull people in who've represented them before, like Dante Leon or maybe even Mikey Musumeki. They've still got Pixley. So yeah, what do you think about that if it is Atos and PSF that are the 4th and 5th teams involved? I think you've muted yourself as well. So
Yeah,
maybe
so Atos is definitely a good shout. I think everyone wanted to see them in there, and they're definitely going to be one of the stronger teams. Pedigo, not as sold on. Yeah, there is guys that they could possibly bring in, and they've got their wild card as well. But yeah, I just don't think they're a super strong team. Probably not going to see Couch compete for them just to some controversy that happened with him recently. And then the only other guy that went to ADCC was Pixley, I think. So yeah, not the strongest team, but they could potentially draw in people. There's probably other teams they maybe could have contacted and picked over them, but that's how it's turned out. So
well, we don't know for sure. It's just like that's what is being suggested right now. So, but for the context of this pod, what we're going to do is steer clear of guys who are associated with those 5 teams because they might be selected already. And then we have the 3 continents: Americas, Europe, and Australasia. So again, we've made our suggestions on a previous pod as to who we think will be in for those continental teams. So we'll kind of steer clear of picking those guys as well along the way, right? But we'll get in. I think 66 is a great category to bring in to kick off the debate about the wildcards, because there's a lot of contenders in this category, right? And one of the contenders that has possibly shot himself to the top of the list as being like the hottest guy to pick on current form would be Deandre Corbe, based on his performance at the Zapatero Invitational. So, Calum, enlighten us a little bit about Deandre's form and why you think he might be a good pick.
yeah, so Deandre was like breaking out into like the upper echelon of that division before ADCC. His trials run was really impressive. He kind of ran through everybody at that trials run. And then before that, he did a lot of like local, like smaller super fight shows in America where he was beating a lot of good guys that would maybe like just about qualify for ADCC, but didn't have any wins over like top names yet. He was struggling against some of the top names. Like I think he had Fabricio Andre first round of ADCC. He lost that match. He had a match against Ethan Krelson, who's number 1. He lost that match. And then at the Zapatero Invitational, he had Diego Pato, I think, in the semi-finals or the finals. So
semi against Diego, and then Josh Cicernos in the final.
yeah, so both those guys are previous ADCC medalists. Pato in that division is either number 1 or number 2, however you want to look at it. So that was, and he won that match. I think it was a decision. It was quite impressive, even like trading leg locks. He didn't seem shy about being in that sort of zone with him. He looked very comfortable and was able to compete with Pato in that. And I think that was his first win over like a definite top guy in that division. So seen him progress a lot recently. Like I say, before ADCC, he was definitely getting his name in there, looking really good against the guys that were maybe just making it to ADCC. But Pato is one of those top guys, and he got that first win. So I think he's established himself now as being one of the best guys in that division.
Now, with Deandre, often comes the debate about ecological training, because Deandre's coach, Greg Souders, is the biggest advocate for that style. And without getting into the debate about ecological training, I think if you watch the highlights of that event from Deandre and his brother Gavin's performances on the Standard Jiu Jitsu channel, which I assume the video is still up on YouTube. I watched it there. There's something impressive with the coaching and what the athlete was trying to do was just follow like simple, straightforward concepts that had high return on the results. So like, you know, if you can keep someone's feet off your hips, that's a good aim to go for. And it's like simple objective. And I think like within that style of training, there's a lot of that. You know, you're trying to get your opponent's hands to the mat. That's a big win, right? Get behind them, big win. And I think we saw that with the good thing about that video is you can hear Greg's coaching with Deandre. But I just thought that's a good way to go about like, a competition match. Did you watch the video? Are you yeah, so what's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I agree. I think that's, even though we don't fully subscribe to like the ecological approach, I think we both realise there is a lot of value in what Greg does and speaks about, and there is good things to take from it. And it is a tool that we have used and still use. Yeah, those kind of things, like the more conceptual things, like bigger ideas, are massive to add into your game, as well as like the specific techniques, because jiu-jitsu is so broad and complex, and like you might learn one thing one way and then it happens differently in an actual role. Having those bigger, broader concepts to just remember and focus on can really fill out the gaps in the knowledge where maybe the more specific things you looked at don't quite fit. Like I say, things happen. I think that's a big part of Greg's argument, is like everyone's a different size, different athleticism. Everything's going to be slightly different every time you do it, and that is completely true. So I think that's where those broad concepts come in, and especially for competing as well, because you know, if you're talking someone through a specific technique in competition, by the time you shout that out to someone, the situation's going to have changed and that opportunity is more than likely going to have passed by. So I think focusing on the more broad ideas for someone in competition and just reminding them of the bigger concepts is going to be more helpful from a coaching perspective in a match rather than specifics.
Yeah, so I'm sort of steering clear of the debate about learning and how we take in information and all that. More focusing on like the call and response actions of like a coach and an athlete relationship. And I think like the athlete's under so much duress in the match. Everything's heightened. There's a lot of stimuli. Like you don't have time to use a lot of words. And then when the opponent is someone with the skill level and the threat of paddle, like you can't mess about. You need like one or two words just to make your point, you know? So something as simple as like elbows to mat, which prevents the back take and back exposure, super useful. So I like, it's something I try and do in my coaching now is like concentrate areas down to like one or two things that can take care of a lot of the other things. And just if you can put your focus on denying something, which I think actually was a lot of the match, was a lot of like Deandre denying Pato the ability to do stuff, but also like if you can then do it on the other side as well, and you can tell an athlete just to do something with 3 words that takes care of a lot of stuff and puts them in a much stronger position, I think that's a great way to go about things. So like that's where I really see the value of that style of training. But I thought this was a good chance to flag up that match that we have seen without doing a big deep dive into the tournament. But yeah, Deandre had a great performance, and I think now he's like firmly in that like upper tier of grapplers at under 66. So with the lighter weight classes, again, some of these guys could be under 66, some of them could be under 77, right? Depending on what they choose to do, where teams might try and recruit them, what they're doing before and after the event. But what are some names you think, Calum, that we might see at the lighter weight classes in CJI2 who are attractive wildcard options?
Yeah, so like we spoke about, definitely Deandre at this point. Like we spoke about as well, the South America team, they're going to have to stick with Pato or Baby Shark, so whoever doesn't get picked out of them will be an obvious choice. And we don't know how many people are going to get picked for each weight class. Like, the way it works out it could be, there's a few slots at 66, there's none at 77. Just depends what team picks what weight class for their wild card. So we don't know how many guys are going to get selected. But yeah, I would say Deandre, and then who doesn't get selected out of Pato and Baby Shark. If Owen Jones isn't selected for B team and maybe Ash Williams is picked over him for Europe, I think his submission threat, he will be someone that can be called upon, and I'm sure he's willing to compete for that event. So that would be another name I would throw in there. Fabrice Deandre as well could be another one. There's tons of guys at 66. It's a very competitive big class.
Couple of guys I've got written down: Kennedy Maciel, Gabriel Souza, Gerbeg, and Braminov. I should have just stuck with saying Gerbeg, shouldn't I? Yeah. So yeah, I think there's a lot of guys at 66 up for grabs though, and then that kind of like moves into the 77 category as well, because you might get some guys who could do either. I think your point on Pato or Baby Shark might come down to whether Mika does 77 for Americas, and I think if Mika does that, then teammate Baby Shark being the under 66 guy would make sense. You had the idea that maybe even Melky Galvao could coach that team.
Yeah, so Lachlan got picked for the Australasia team. Depends where your focus was more. I think because there's so many North American teams, it would make sense for there to be slightly more Brazilian athletes in the Americas team. And then, yeah, I think Melky's definitely kind of solidified himself as the top coach down there, especially just right now with the success he's having in competition with a small amount of guys. Homegrown guys as well. He's not like, he's recruiting some guys now, but like for the most part, it's guys that he's worked with since they were like young athletes. So I think he's the clear shout for that team if they are going the more South American route.
Yeah, and under 77, we could see Dante Leon, but then again, it depends if he gets picked for Americas. It depends if PSF go in and Dante decides to represent them, but I think he's a good shout. And then we've got guys who could be under 77 or under 88. So like Andrew Tackett, for example, would be a great contender for that. And obviously his brother William's out there as well, slightly heavier, but they train at Brazilian Fight Factory. So we don't have them down as being one of the teams involved. So I think they're both up for grabs. Any other guys kind of at that kind of middleweight, we'll say?
Yeah, I think Roberto Jiminez could do that weight, even though he seems to have more success at the heavier weight classes than he does when he cuts to 77. Wagner Hocha as well could be another one. Yeah, I think that's about it for the 77 that I can think of.
Okay, and then you mentioned Roberto. That gives us a chance to talk about Pans, and I think the highlight of the Pans event was the match between Roberto Jiminez and Adam Virginski, which last time I looked was on the IBJJF YouTube channel, so you should definitely check that match out if you haven't seen it. Adam likes to play butterfly guard. Roberto used very athletic maneuvers to avoid the butterfly guard for like bits of the match, which gave him an advantage, like vaulting over the butterfly guard to the back. If you can do that, I can't do that, but if you can do that, you think you could have a go at it, right? Yeah. You've got a cartwheel in your locker. Right, but it's not in my wheelhouse. But yeah, Roberto, that's the thing about Roberto. He'd be a great guy to have involved in this event because he brings the excitement. Yeah, and I think that's what we need as well. It's like names and exciting grapplers, fill out these teams and just make it like as exciting an event as possible. I think Roberto Jiminez would be a great guy to have for that. And yeah, not attached to one of the teams that's going to be in this. I think he represents, is it Ecuador? So technically could be in the Americas team, but I think he'd be a good contender. Anyone else round about the higher end of 88? So like one you'd mentioned maybe would be like Isaac Michel, William Tackett we've spoke about. Anyone else you think around about that we could be looking at as wildcard options?
Yeah, I'd probably, if I was the Americas team, be looking to get Pedro Mourinho at 88. That'd be one of the better guys. But if he's not selected, he could be another wild card. Yeah.
Now, you had a good shout of some ideas outside of the Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu / no-gi submission grappling guys that we're used to talking about on the Jiu-Jitsu Oracle. So who do you think are some guys that we could possibly see come in and create some interest?
Yeah, some cool names would be Buchecha for one. You know, if he's moved over to MMA, but massive name in Jiu-Jitsu, it'd be really cool to see him do this event and come back to competitive grappling. If it is $1 million prize pot split with 5 people, 200K each, that's probably at least what he's getting for his fighting. So to do that in a Jiu-Jitsu competition, I'm sure that would entice him over if he was interested. As well, just some other MMA guys like Sean Brady. He just looked amazing with his grappling against Leon Edwards last weekend. Be cool to see him in this, and he's got a win over Craig Jones as well in a pure grappling match. So he can definitely hang with these kind of guys, or at least maybe shut someone down. That's what he did to Craig, just shut his game down. Hamzat Chimaev, someone like that would be really cool as well. Don't know how likely that would be, but that would be pretty cool to see.
Yeah, and Jason North as well, maybe around about like the same. Yeah. You mentioned Buchecha. That was a great shout for an over 99 guy who could be available. That would be awesome for the event, like one of the all-time greats in the sport. I suppose as well, Marcelo's still out there, you know.
Yeah.
And we'd said on our previous pod, we'd love to see like a super fight between Marcelo and Lachlan. I think that would be a good match. But Lachlan now coaching the Australasia team, maybe that's his involvement in the event. So again, Marcelo, if someone could recruit him, that would be huge. But yeah, I think Buchecha is a great shout. Other guys over 99. I mean, I think the one over 99, if not Buchecha, is Felipe Pena, who's Gracie Baja. So we don't think they're going to be involved. But Pena, especially with the history with Gordon and New Wave, I think if you could bring him in, that would create some excitement in the event.
Yeah, for sure.
And like we saw in his recent ADCC performance, like still one of the best in the world. Yeah. And you still have Cyborg as well. He had a good ADCC performance, so he's at that weight. And then, yeah, under 99, again, it's like maybe Roberto Jiminez does the under 99.
Yeah.
Anyone else?
The guys you just mentioned, Felipe and Cyborg, could do under 99 as well quite easily.
Yeah. So anyone else that we've not mentioned, please let us know, because I think like this is the joy of the CJI2 event is right now try to come up with the starting fives for these teams. How would we use wildcards? Who's out there? Like totally left field kind of like picks that we've kind of forgotten about. Like you brought up Igor Tanabe on the last pod, and I was like, yes, Igor Tanabe, not seen him for ages, but a fantastic grappler, and he'd be great to have on a team. So there's definitely guys like that out there. So anything else that you want to mention with regards to CGI2 as the land currently lies for the event?
The only thing is, they kind of trickled out the rules last time we were speaking before the podcast. I don't really know how it's going to work, if it's like a winner stays on. If it is winner stays on, how is that working? Is it like Polaris 3 points for a submission? Like if you're a lower weight class, like so many variables, or is it more like AIGA where it's like my 77 guys against your 77 guy? Because that's going to really matter for the makeup of the team. Because if it's AIGA, you can just have 3 really strong guys, 3 out of 5, that's going to be you winning with the majority. So that's going to change your makeup compared to if it is winner stays on, then you're just going to look for maybe 1 or 2 guys with really good submission threats, other guys that can shut people's games down. So has there been a confirmation on that as far as the rule set?
Yeah, I've not heard any confirmation. The only thing that leads me, well, there's 2 things that lead me to believe that it's winner stays on, essentially. Would be 1, the fact that it was mentioned that we're doing a quintet-style event. Yeah. And 2, Lachlan Giles in his recruitment speech about how he's going to go about things said he wants like a submission Wiz at 66 because he wants someone who he thinks those guys are going to be able to do like a lot of damage. If you can have like your lightest guy able to take out 1, 2, maybe even 3, then of the other guys, that's a huge win for your team. You know, that's why, like we said before, when we were picking the continental teams, like Shizinski, if it's that style of rule, like Shizinski could literally take out a whole team by himself.
Yeah.
Again, haven't put him in as a wild card. Like, I think he's locked in for Europe. Like, I'd be amazed if he's not on that European team and that whole team's built around him. But if he's not, like, obviously he would be a huge pick for a 77. But I think it's the quintet style that we've seen before. But again, if we can get some confirmation on these things, that would be awesome. And then outside of that, we've got some exciting events coming up towards the middle to end of April. There's WNO 27 on April 18. There's a BJJ Stars event on April 26 that looks amazing. They've got a Grand Prix and some super fights. Then at the end of May, we've got FPI. They're going to get the Fionn Davis against Adele Fornerino match on that wasn't able to happen before because Fionn hurt her shoulder, I believe, in training. And then we're heading towards BJJ Worlds at the end of May, early June. And I think, like, just to flag up again, yes, there was the pans that happened recently, a BJJ major from the IBJJF. But I think what happened there is going to be talked about more before the Worlds. Like, what I'm interested in is how what happened at Pans is going to affect the Worlds, who are the new contenders on the scene, etc. that we could go see, that we could see going deeper in the Worlds. I think like that's the interest coming out of that event for me. So no Pans special, but we'll kind of like save that for the context of how the Euros, the Pans, and the Brazilian nationals feed into the Worlds and who we're looking for. But that's our chat on CJI2 for now. And what do you think about the wildcard situation? Let us know who you would pick. Who are the top contenders out there? And we'll be back soon with more previews and reviews of big shows in the submission grappling scene.